Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here this morning with you. It's beautiful outside. Well, maybe by the time we get out of here, maybe it'll be all gone already. But it is beautiful. I like that. I like to see it on the trees, especially when the trees are all covered in snow. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that music today. That was very nice, guys. Thank you. That sounded beautiful. Well, you probably know what I'm going to be talking about today, or who I'm talking about today. For those of you that follow along at all, I'm still on the story of Elisha. But we are living in very interesting times. The coming of Jesus is very near. And I've been thinking about changing the topic. But thankfully, this story today has something to remind us of Jesus' soon coming. And so we'll stick to the story. So before I start, let's have a word of prayer. Please bow your heads with me. Dear Father in heaven, I thank you so much for your goodness and your mercy. Thank you for your word. I pray that you would teach us today, every one of us. Guide us with your word. Help us to know you better. Help us to see your love and your mercy and your great power. And please, Father, I pray, give all of us, and give me the Holy Spirit this morning as I speak. I ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Well, I want you to turn your Bibles to 2 Kings chapter 4. And I do want to hear the leaves, what do you call it? Shuffling, ruffling, rustling. There you go. Or your phone clicking to, that place. And it's okay if you put it on the screen, Matt, but it's long, so probably you don't want to follow along and click and click and click. I'm reading quite a few verses. So I'm going to read all the verses of this story. It takes about 5 minutes. So please just follow along and listen. We're talking about Elisha raises the Shunammite's son. This is 2 Kings chapter 4. And we're going to read chapter verses 8 all the way to 37 as we dig into this. I like to have you have this story fresh in your mind. You may not have read it in a while. And so I want you to hear it, and then we'll talk about the details of this story and how wonderful this story is. Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. So it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there to eat some food. And she said to her husband, "Look now, I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please, let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. So it will be, whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there." And it happened one day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. Then he said to Gehazi, his servant, "Call this Shunammite woman." When he had called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, "Say now to her, look, you have been concerned for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army?" She answered, "I dwell among my own people." So he said, "What then is to be done for her?" And Gehazi answered, "Actually, she has no son, and her husband is old." So he said, "Call her." When he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then he said, "About this time next year you shall embrace a son." And she said, "No, my lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant." But the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. And the child grew. Now it happened one day that he went out to his father, to the reapers. And he said to his father, my head, my head." So he said to his servant, "Carry him to his mother." When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon, and then died. So she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door behind him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, "Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back." So he said, "Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath." And she said, "It is well." Now, the title of the sermon is "It Shall Be Well," which is what the King James says. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, "Drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you." And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. So it was, when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to his servant Gehazi, "Look, the Shunammite woman. Please run now to meet her and say to her, 'Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child?' And she answered, 'It is well.' Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came to push her away. But the man of God said, 'Let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me.' So she said, 'Did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me?' Then he said to Gehazi, 'Get yourself ready, and take my staff in your hand, and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child.' And the mother of the child said, 'As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you.' So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, 'The child has not awakened.' When Elisha came into the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, 'Call this Shunammite woman.' So he called her. And when she came to him, he said, 'Pick up your son.' So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out." Now, this story, back to the beginning here a little bit as we started, there's something, so it calls her a notable woman. And I don't know what that makes you think about. It could be any number of things. Maybe she was somewhat like of a notable family, of a well-to-do family. Or maybe she was wealthy. Or maybe, we don't know. It doesn't say here what makes her notable. And but I think there are things in the story that as we go back and dig into this, that we can find some things that make her notable in a sense that we want to explore today. So maybe not about wealth or not about position or whatever it might be. There are notable things about this woman. And the first thing that comes to mind as I look at this here is that she sees a man come by her house every now and then, and she says, "We should invite this man in for lunch." It's probably a dusty road that he's going along, and he's tired. In fact, the fact that she wants to have a place where he can come in and rest suggests that, yes, she sees him go by, and she knows that he's tired. So she convinces him to come in for a meal. And that's a notable action right there. In fact, as we know the story, we've already read it, we know how the ending goes. This beginning of her being gracious and kind toward someone who she doesn't really know. She does appear to recognize that he is Elisha the prophet. Later on, for sure, she knows. But at the beginning, it just mentions that, she invites him in and convinces him to come and eat. And then she says, later on to her husband, that, "Look now, this holy man of God, he comes by." And so she has opened up her house to this man and his servant. And as we see this story here, there's no doubt that to any one of us, when we open up our hearts, when we go beyond ourselves to help someone, particularly a stranger, someone who needs help, you can be assured that the stories of yourself and that stranger will be forever changed when you do this with the love of God in your heart. When you do it, as Jesus said, to your neighbor, the one who needs it. Your stories will be irreversibly changed, and for all eternity, there'll be an impact of that story on your life. Hopefully, it's always a positive impact. But it does, but in this case here, we see that it is. And so this is the notable thing, that this woman went out of her way to do this. Now, we know something about Elisha as well, and we have a comparison to Elijah. Elijah came along and he had a message that was kind of, we might say harsh. It was a message of judgment. The people of Israel were following the pagan gods. The king was leading them, and his wife, Jezebel, were leading them into all kinds of wickedness. And so Elisha came with a message of judgment, and the people suffered greatly during the 3.5 years of famine, of drought, no rain. They suffered. And so, if you remember, when Elijah was on Mount Carmel, and he told people to come near to me, nobody moved. They all watched him from wherever they were. They didn't say a thing. And it wasn't until after the priests of Baal had finished their jumping and shouting, and then he built the altar and he called them again, they moved a bit closer. So they looked at Elijah as kind of like, be careful with that man. He has the power of God to do things that kind of scary. But that's not the case with Elisha. Elisha was a very different man in that regard. He was kind. He was thoughtful. And he went about trying to bless people. And not that Elijah wasn't wanting blessings, but there had to be some changes first. And so here with Elisha, we have a very different kind of man. I'll mention something to you here. Let's see if I got this timing right on this. So about Elisha, this is from Prophets and Kings, page 235. Elisha's was a more peaceful mission. His it was to build up and strengthen the work that Elijah had begun, to teach the people the way of the Lord. Inspiration pictures him as coming into personal touch with the people, surrounded by the sons of the prophets, bringing by his miracles and his ministry healing and rejoicing. Elisha was a man of mild and kindly spirit. So that's what Elisha was like. It makes it easy to invite someone into your house who is like that. So maybe a lesson for all of us, that's a good way to live too. Be like Elisha. Now, I mentioned in this paragraph here, in parentheses there, what follows is the story of the bears, which you all probably know the story as well. And we talked about this in our Sabbath school lesson today. The joining of mercy and judgment, that is part of what God's character is like. And Elisha certainly was a man of mercy, of kindness, mild, but when necessary, that by itself is not enough. Sometimes you do need judgment. And in the case here, Elisha recognized that and prayed for those bears that in the punishment that came from those bears, Elisha was able to continue with that same spirit of mildness and kindness in his ministry the rest of his life. So anyways, interesting things here about these two people, part of the story. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a geographical view of this. So where is this? This is kind of hard to see, I know. But Shunem is a little red polygon there. I just wanted to have the name of the city within the dot and the dot together. So that's not the shape of Shunem. That's just where it is. You can see there in the middle. That is the tribe of Issachar. And it is in Joshua 19, I believe it is, where Shunem is divided by lots to the tribe of Issachar. Issachar is a very small little spot there. You can see that. So that's where Shunem is, and that's where the lady lives. Excuse me. Now we saw in the story one day Elisha stops in, and then the lady then makes he comes by often. No doubt he's on his circuit of preaching or teaching at the schools of the prophets. So he goes by every now and then, and she says, he comes here often. Let's make a house for him. Let's make a little room for him. And so they do that. And so Elisha wants to thank her. And now the story, as you read it here, it seems a bit difficult to understand. Elisha calls her to the door, and then it describes him talking to Gehazi. ask her what she wants. Can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? And then he says, call her, and she's at the door. So I don't think that's how it went. I think that Elisha and Gehazi had the discussion, what can we do for her? Go ask her. And then he says, bring her, call her here. And then we see that she's at the door. So it's not like she was at the door while he and Gehazi were having this discussion. Okay, so he asked what to do, and Gehazi suggests to Elisha, so helpfully, she doesn't have a son. And probably she can't. Her husband must be old. He's basically what he's suggesting. And so Elisha offers, or he promises to her, that she's going to have a son. Now you can see from her answer here, she says, no, my Lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. Why do you think she would say that? Sorry, say that again? Her hopes have been dashed. She's wanted a son. Her and her husband have wanted a child. And no doubt, several times they've had the promise of having a baby. For whatever reason, they didn't. Maybe they've been praying for it. Maybe she's been pregnant and she's lost the baby. Who knows? And so her answer here is not saying, I don't want a baby. Do not give me one. She just thinks it's not going to happen. Don't promise something that you can't keep. Now, I'm going to tell you a little quick story here. This whole thing here, we see this in the Bible a lot, of a woman who is longing for a baby. And I thought to myself, what is that like? I don't really know. I can't have that. I don't really understand that. But there is a story that I'll tell you briefly here. I'll try to keep it so it's not too personal. But when Melissa and I were getting married, I had to let her know that I could not be the father of any child that she had. And so she understood that. And she was okay. And but now you also know that Melissa's been a couple months visiting her friend Sherlon, whose husband just died. And so she just got back. Well, when Melissa and I got married, Sherlon and her were still good friends. Of course, they've been best friends for a long, long time. And now Melissa knew that she would not have a baby from me. And my two sons from my first marriage, we had said, we would treat them like our own children. But then Sherlon had a baby, Melissa's best friend. And it wasn't too long that Melissa came to me and she said, I want a baby. Now, I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help. Well, there are options, And so we started talking about those options. And, one of them was surgery for me. And we went to a local, doctor and talked to him about it. And he said to us, you can go to a local doctor and they can do the surgery. And your chances of success are about 60 to 70%, maybe 60%. And then he said, well, you can go to a regional doctor, more well-known, and maybe they'll get you to like 75% success rate. And he said, but you can go to a national level doctor, and you might get like maybe to 80%. Or you can go to an internationally renowned doctor who has regularly had percentages of like 95, 98% success rate. Now, if you really want a child, what are you going to do? 60%? Is that good enough? 95. No, it's not good enough, is it? Well, our insurance plans did not cover this kind of work. And so Melissa said, we're going to sell our house. It was her house. When we got married, I moved into her house. And she said, we're going to sell our house. And we're going to go back to, we're going to buy a mobile home and put it on a piece of land somewhere, and we're going to go get that surgery. And so we called up Dr. Sherman Silber, a world-renowned doctor in St. Louis, Missouri, who has treated presidents and sheiks and kings and from all over the world. And It was a significant sacrifice, but Melissa wanted a baby. And if you're wondering whether it worked, you only have to look back at the back row and you can know that it worked. And so, in a sense, I kind of understand a little bit about that desire to have a baby. At one point, Melissa understood, yeah, it's not going to happen. I'm okay with that. And then at one point, Melissa was like, I need to have a baby. So here, this woman here, no doubt had desired a baby, and now it's being promised to her at 100% success rate, by the way. And so now the story quickly moves on in years. Now we see this little boy. He's no longer a baby. He's probably, I don't think he's like 3 or 4 running out in the field. He's probably older than that, maybe 8, 9, 10, possibly. He wants to be with his father. He wants to watch what's happening out there in the field. And all I can say about this here, this must have been a hot place because the boy's out there and he gets a heat stroke, and by noon, the boy is dead. So in the morning, not just all day. You know, you've heard about people getting heat stroke. Here, in mostly, if it happens in the U.S., it's probably they've been in the sun all day long, you know, through the noon time. Well, here, it's enough to get the boy a heat stroke before noon. The father, the boy comes to the father, my head, the father sends him to his mother. And he sits on her knee until noon. She's trying to take care of him. And then he dies. And now, based on Jewish tradition, when someone dies, they must be buried within a day. Now, that could be the next day at the longest. You took care of that right away. You know, I mean, you don't have any way to preserve a body. And so and in that heat, you can imagine, you don't leave a body around for long. You bury it quickly. And yet here, we see that she doesn't do anything along the lines of what tradition would have called for at that moment. She takes the boy and puts him up on Elisha's bed. And I don't know, you mothers are here. Of course, fathers too feel anguish over the loss of a child. But for the mother that yearns for the child and then to lose the child, I can only imagine. But I want you to think about it a little bit. I know some of you in here have lost children, and you know what this is like. And I can barely imagine it. Now, the woman, the mother here, does something that's so interesting to me as we look at the story. She could well have lashed out to her husband. Why did you let the boy come out here? Why didn't you keep an eye on him? Why did you have him in the shade? It's your fault. You took away my son. She could have done that. She could have come out wailing and crying. And you know what? And for all this attention that would have resulted from her making a big deal about it, no one would have said, why are you doing that, right? It would have been totally appropriate to make a big deal about the son just dying. And yet she doesn't do that. She tells her husband, get me a donkey and a servant. I'm going to Elisha's place right now. And he even asks, why? Why would you want to do that? It's not the new moon or it's not the Sabbath. Like, what are you doing? And what does she say? It will be well. So apparently even now he knows the boy was sick. The boy was sent to his mother. Don't know what else he knows at this point. The story doesn't tell us. Perhaps he knew at this point as well. But the mother says, don't worry. It will be well. And so she gets in the donkey. And let me see if I got some more information. Well, it's hard to see. There's some yellow pins on this picture. This is modern-day Israel. Shunem is right down near the bottom. Does it have a laser on it, Matt?
It does, but doesn't show up on the
Okay. So down near the bottom is Shunem. And then you can see some other towns in the area. Mount Tabor, Nazareth, Cana, Capernaum, and Mount Carmel. And there were many others there, of course. I didn't want to clutter the map too much. And so she's going to get on a donkey, and she's going to have her servant drive the donkey as fast as she can tolerate and go to Mount Carmel. Now, how far do you think it is? Well, I won't go to the next slide yet. Let me talk about this here for a minute. This is not the case of a chopped off finger. You go, what are you talking about, Brian? Well, today, if someone has an accident, they chop off the finger, you rush that finger in ice to the hospital and they can sew it on. Okay, sometimes, right? Haste is extremely important. But the boy is dead. The boy is dead. Why is haste important here? The woman says, get this donkey. I want to go as fast as I can tolerate to get to Elisha. So she's acting as though time is of the essence here. I think that's very interesting. This is not, she's not being overly dramatic, because we saw she has not been dramatic so far. Time is of the essence for her. So the question again was like, how far is this? Well, let's see if I can show this. Here you go. Okay, so from a different perspective here, Shunem is there next to Jezreel, above there, and that green line is about 21 miles, 21 miles. So how long is this trip? Well, it's about 40 miles, right? It's there and back. How fast can you go with a donkey at 40 miles? Well, a donkey, those of you who are listening, especially the little ones, young ones, a donkey can walk along at about 3.5 miles an hour. It can gallop or trot up to 40, but with no burden. When a donkey has a burden on, it's going to go probably a maximum of about 4.5 to 5 miles an hour. The burden in this case is the woman. She's sitting on the donkey. So how long does this trip take? How many? Hour and a half. 40 miles. So 20 miles divided by 3.5. 4.5. It's about 4 hours. 4 to 5 hours to get there. And it's about 4.5 hours, 4 to 5 hours back. Is my math right? Think so? Tom had a quizzical look on his face. I thought you were doing the math in your head and thinking, Brian, where are you? What are you talking about? So I talk about rush. I talk about urgency. In that time, there was no such thing as jump on the plane or jump in the car. And this is urgent. This is fast. And it's at 4.5 miles an hour to find the prophet. Now, in this story, we see that Elisha sees her coming from far off, which I found very interesting. So Elisha was on Mount Carmel. Apparently, after Elijah's, service up there, the Bible even talks about Elijah staying on Mount Carmel. So Elisha was on Mount Carmel. So maybe this was his place. And you can see from far away. And maybe there's a windy road coming up. I don't know. So somehow Elisha sees her coming, and he knows who it is, which I find notable. Perhaps her being a notable woman was that she dressed in a way that you recognize her. Maybe the colors. Who knows? He knows it's her. And he says to Gehazi, go and find out what's going on. This doesn't seem right. Just like her husband had said to her, it's not the new moon, it's not the Sabbath. Why are you going? Elisha must have thought the same thing. Why is she coming? It's not the new moon. It isn't the Sabbath. Something is wrong. And so he sends Gehazi. What does she tell Gehazi? It is well. I'm talking to you, Gehazi. I have just like Elisha told Gehazi later on, don't talk to anybody along the way. She was not going to talk to anybody until she got to Elisha. That's a notable thing, too. We'll talk about that in a little bit, I think. Now, when she gets to Elisha, and she falls down at his feet, grabs his feet, and she she cries about this, what has happened. Did I not tell you? Don't deceive me. So Elisha immediately understands what's happened. Gehazi tries to come and interfere, and he says, no, no, no. He says, God has not revealed to me what has happened here. And that's very interesting. And I thought about that a little bit. Why would he be confused by this? He's confused. He's surprised. Let's see the words here. Let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. Why do you think the Lord has hidden this from Elisha? What would it mean to have told him about it? Before it happened? Or at the same time that it happened? Or maybe as the woman was on the way? What would Elisha have done? What do you think he would have done as soon as he found out what had happened? He would have been on his way, right? To go either stop it or do something for sure. And I think this is why Elisha is surprised that the gift that God promised her through him is now gone. What? What are you talking about? Why didn't God let me know to stop this from happening? I'm sure this is what was going through his head, something along those lines. Is there a benefit in this story at all for Elisha not knowing? Well, you can maybe think of other stories like this. Can you think of one where somebody knew about someone's sickness that would lead to death, and he waited? Jesus. And Jesus knew that if he had been there, and so did the sisters, Lord, if you had been here, he would not have died. And so the Lord did not reveal this to Elisha, so that the same kind of a blessing, the same kind of effect that would come from this story for that time was what Jesus had when Lazarus died. He was going to wait until Lazarus died and then go and resurrect him, and would give him the signal miracle of his time here on earth with us, other than his own resurrection. And so, yeah, this story, sometimes in our lives, we may have things happen to us and we say, God, why? Or perhaps, why didn't I know about this before it happened? I would have done something different. Who knows what? And I tell you, when those things happen, when you wonder about that, why, God, why didn't you prepare me for this? I don't feel prepared now. God always has something good in mind for you. Through all the bad that happens, we know we can trust him that he has good things in mind for us. So no matter what happens. Now, that doesn't mean that he is blessing and wanting the thing that happens to you to happen. But he knows what will happen to you. It may be because of your own actions that things are happening to you, but in his hands, all things can be made well. Now, in the story here, we see that the woman gets out. She tells Elisha what is the problem, and there's something interesting I see in the story. There's an attempt to hasten the outcome that they both want, Elisha and the woman. So, for one thing, as he sees the woman coming, rather than waiting for her to arrive, he rushes Gehazi down the hill, find out what it is, and get back before she arrives and tell me. He's perhaps a little impatient. He doesn't want to wait for her to arrive. He sends Gehazi. Now, when he finds out that the boy is dead, he sends Gehazi, go as quickly as you can with the stick, with my staff, lay it on the boy's face. Right now, go. And again, like I said earlier, this is not a cut off finger. This is a dead boy. So there's this desire to rush, which I find interesting. I mean, I don't fault it at all, but I just find it interesting that it happens again and again. And so, he tells Gehazi, go ahead, go, but do not stop to anybody along the way. Don't greet anybody. And in effect, be kind of a grumpy man, just rush off down the road and go as fast as you can. Well, then the woman says to Elisha, I'm not going to leave you. So I'm stuck with you here, or you're coming with me. And so he recognizes what this is about. And he's going to go now with her too. So presumably she's on the donkey again. And so now then another 21 miles back to Shunem. The boy died at noon. She got on her donkey shortly after that, and 4.5, 5 hours later gets to Mount Carmel. And now 4.5 hours, 5 hours later, they're coming back. So it's nighttime when they get home, when they get back to the house. Now, there's something going on here. Even though there's the rushing going on, this attempt to try and solve the problem quickly, there's something very clearly happening here in the story, especially from the woman's perspective. Why would she put the boy on Elisha's bed? He's dead. Prepare him for burial. Why did she do that? Why did she go this way to Elisha? The boy's dead. It's because she has faith. She, no doubt, in the times that Elisha had come by and stopped at her house to eat, maybe over dinner, or perhaps over, sitting around the fire outside in the evening after supper, and before they go to bed, he's told her the stories of Elijah and the woman of Zarephath and her son, and how God did it through Elijah to bring this boy back to life. And that is the first recorded resurrection in the Bible. And this woman is certain that today there will be another one. And that is great faith. That's a notable faith. Who is she to expect this? Right? I mean, there's many other people in Israel who could potentially deserve this. But she expects it's going to be her today. And Jesus said about believing, he said here in Matthew 21:22, and whatever things you ask in prayer, believing you will receive. Did she believe? She absolutely believed. I like how the Amplified Bible says it there a little bit as well. It says, and whatever you ask for in prayer, having faith and really believing, you will receive. True faith, true belief, not a hope. I mean, hope is good, but this is a type of understanding, a type of belief that says, God is going to answer this. I know it. Now, when they get to the house, Elisha goes in, and of course he prays, he closes the door. Although it does seem that at one point he gets up and walks around the house, it sounds like. But he goes in and he prays. And this is where we begin to see something about why Elisha did not know beforehand as well. Elisha must now become very engaged in this event. He's not just going to pray, as you see what happens here. He must lay himself out on the boy, cover him as much as he can, breathe into his mouth, put his eyes over his eyes, like he's trying to almost be one with this boy to do something. Now, Elisha knew that Elijah had done the same thing. On this woman of Zarephath, Elijah had lain on the boy to warm him up as well. And so, well, what's the student going to do? What the teacher said. So Elisha is going to do this as well. Now here it appears he does it twice, from what it tells us. But if Elisha had known about this to prevent the boy from dying, he would never have had this experience. And this is actually an important experience. We'll get into that in just a little bit here. Then the boy, he sneezes 7 times, and he wakes up. Now, this is the second of 7 resurrections described in the Bible that lead up to Jesus' own resurrection. Okay, 7 of them. And if you will be reminded of them, let's see if I have them noted down here, because I don't think I can remember them all by myself. Zarephath, the Shunammite boy, the dead man who was placed on Elisha's bones, remember that story? Who was resurrected. No one said a thing for that resurrection. No one prayed or anything. So that's pretty interesting. Jairus' daughter, number 4. The widow's son at Nain, number 5. Lazarus, number 6. And then Jesus himself. Okay? 7 resurrections. 7 sneezes. They're not related necessarily. But the number 7 is here in this story. And it's a perfect number. God has been involved in this story. Very much so. And the Bible, Sister White says in here, in Prophets and Kings 2:39, so was the faith of this woman rewarded. This is what this is about. This is about the faith. This is a very strong faith, resilient. It doesn't give up. And it expects great things from God. And God rewarded that faith. Now, this story, looking at Elijah and then Elisha, I've talked before about Elijah being like John the Baptist. And of course, Jesus describes John the Baptist coming before himself, of Elijah coming before he came, and that was John the Baptist. So Elisha is a lot like Christ. In fact, I think he's a type of Christ. And in this story, we see something about the incarnation of Christ. Because in order for Elisha to wake up this boy, part of what he needed to do was to lay on him, to become as close as he could to him, to wake him up. Well, how did Jesus come to save us? He had to get as close as he could to us. So much so he had to become one like us. Otherwise, he could not save us. And so in this story, we see a little picture of this desire that God had for Jesus to be one with us. It just jumped out at me as I was studying this. Like, isn't this amazing? This is Christ. Now, you notice that Elisha sent his staff with Gehazi to lay it on the boy. Now, when you think of a staff in the Bible, whose staff do you think about? Someone said Moses, right? Right away. And so Moses and his staff. What was Moses all about? What did he bring to the people of Israel? He brought the law, didn't he? God brought the law to the people through Moses. So the staff is like the law. And he went and laid it on the boy. Does the law bring life? The law does not bring life. The law brings death. When we sin, the law brings death. And so the law did not bring the boy to life. It was when Elisha came and was one with that boy there, trying to be like, maybe even, Lord, exchange places with me. Who knows what he was praying for. And so we see a little picture here of the plan of salvation. The law brings us to the knowledge of sin, but it destroys us. The law kills us because it tells us you are worthy of death for what you have done. And we need that. That's the judgment that we need, so we understand the terrible situation that is our sinful world. But then Jesus comes along and says, I'm going to be one with you, so that when I die and take your sins upon me, I can forgive them from you. I can wipe them off of your record. Now, at the beginning of this here, we talked about this woman being a notable woman. And so I want to dig into that a little bit. Of course, I mentioned earlier, caring for a stranger. Or maybe he wasn't a stranger, but why did she have to do this? You know, no one else had done it yet. But she felt something in her to be helpful, to be kind. She was unselfish, going above and beyond for others. She believed in the prophet of God. I mean, she went to Elisha at this moment of anguish, and she knew that he could do something about it. Now, I think she knew it was God through him, because when he gave her the promise of the son, it was that God would do this. But she believed in the prophet, and that's a notable thing. She was resilient and persevering, and we need that in our lives. It may not be for this same situation here, but if it is, we still need to be persevering and resilient in our faith to endure through the trials that come. And there are going to be all kinds of trials that come, and we know where we are in the scale of our time, and we know trials are coming. I mean, we're sitting here so comfortable today. We, Sister White says that we often inflate. We think about things that are going to come, our problems, and we inflate them. And we inflate them to be much bigger than they really are. But, she says, of the events to come in the time of trouble, we cannot imagine yet what they'll be like. So we often inflate them, and we won't do justice to the problems that are going to come. Are we going to need a resilient faith during that time? Persevering, resilient faith? Absolutely. Absolutely, we're going to need that. And so, now this woman here was loving. She put others before herself. She would do anything for those for whom she loved. Now, again, as I said earlier, this is about faith. What is it that allows someone to be like that? It has to be faith, right? In other words, no matter what happens in my life, no matter what the situation is, I'm going to trust God to take me through it. And so I'm not going to be flustered and angry and whatever. I'm not going to give up no matter what happens. That requires faith. Faith and say, Lord, I'm putting it in your hands. And so I think for all these things, I don't know if it was what the story meant to say when it called her a notable woman, but these are notable characteristics. And they should be ours too. In particular, the faith that allows us to rest in God no matter what is happening in our lives, no matter what it is. Every one of us has trials, and yet God has promised us, you put that in my hands, and you don't have to worry. You can be Christ-like through this challenge that you're going through. And, I speak this to you here this morning, but this is what I need too. Every one of us. No one is sitting here today thinking, well, I got this covered already. I know that. Now, in our scripture reading today, see if I'm at the right place, there's something better for us. In Hebrews 11, we read about those who by faith achieved great things. And then it said in one spot, it said there, and women received their dead, given back to them again. They received life. But then we see that in Hebrews 11:35, let me run over there quickly so I can read it. Something happens. Not everybody gets what those women got who got their children returned to them alive. In verse 35, others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. The little boy had a resurrection of his type. I think of resurrection as coming out of the grave, but he was resurrected to life. And was that not good? Well, it was good, but that boy died again. So it wasn't a resurrection that had no reversal. And so there's a promise here that some did not hope, did not expect deliverance, or were not afraid of what they might go through, so they might have a better resurrection. And then, if we look ahead as well in the text, going to verse 39, it says in here, and all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us. Now, Paul is writing here, and us as his readers, and that's us today as well, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. So speaking of those who have died, who did not receive the promise at that time, they're going to have something better, but it won't be apart from us. Like, we'll get it together. They will get it, and we will get it. And what is that? And so we see here, Paul is referring to something that happens at the second coming. And he says here in 1 Thessalonians, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep." And so we know that the better thing for us is the resurrection at Jesus' coming. And although we have a lot to go through before that event comes, in the same way that in order to keep God's commandments, we cannot keep them through our strength. And we cannot keep them by loving them, the commandments. We need to love them. But the way to keep God's commandments is to love Him, is to love Jesus. And then you want to do it. That's why Jesus says, if you love me, in effect, you can keep my commandments. And so when we think about what's coming before us, there's a time of trial coming. But if we can think about the joy of seeing Jesus coming in the clouds, and the joy of the resurrection for those of us here who have already lost loved ones, whether it be a child or a parent or a brother or a sister, whatever it is. Think about the joy of that so that you can make it through the difficult time. Don't be afraid of the difficult time. Why be afraid? Because even if you die in the difficult time, there is a better resurrection that is coming. And this story is all about that too. It's not just about faith that the boy would be made alive, yes, but this is about the resurrection. This is about God's power to bring to life whoever He desires. Whoever has put their faith in Him. No matter what happens in your life, whatever happens around you, put your trust in Him, and you will have, either you will see Him coming in the clouds of heaven, or you will have the better resurrection. Isn't that glorious? I mean, that is an amazing thing to keep us through the times that are coming. Maybe right now, some of you are going through a difficult time. God has promised us something to keep our eye on. Don't give up. You will have the reward in the end. So, although so long ago, this story reminds us of the second resurrection, that it will be worthwhile waiting for. It reminds us of Jesus' soon coming and something to keep our hopes on. And it reminds us that through Jesus' own resurrection, we can be the fruits of His resurrection. So there's just so many beautiful things in this story about Jesus as well. I'm grateful for all He has done. And my prayer this morning is that we might hold on to Jesus with the faith that this Shunammite woman had. Unwavering, expecting the answer that God desires. And not only that faith, but the reminder that if we cling with loving obedience and a faith to God's promises, we will have the second resurrection as well. We will see Him coming in the clouds or be resurrected when He comes. And that's a promise that I can cling to. I want to cling to. And so I pray that it'll be yours as well today.